I've actually been able to talk to him about it, which is pretty cool, but I can't even put into words to him directly, like the stuff that he's done for me to get me through hard times, to the different skill sets that are required to do pro wrestling and all the other things I'm trying to pursue. Acting, I told you about a little bit before we hopped on. And then, yeah, other than that, it's been really heavy business focus, rehab focus on the knee, a lot of in-person training that's picked up in Austin, which is really cool, and living life with my beautiful girlfriend, Claire Bays, former guest of the show, and my other beautiful girlfriend, Matthew Olson, who's also viewing as we speak.
Well, thank you to Claire. Thank you to Claire for when she introduced us. And
of course,
you guys came over and we watched some UFC fights and all that. And dude, I remember when I met you, she had told me a little bit you were getting into pro wrestling and doing all that. And I mean, I grew up such a fan of pro wrestling. And so I remember asking you, like, what made you want to get into that? And like, with this intensity, you said straight up to me in my face, you're like, to be a superhero for kids.
Yes.
And like, it gives me chills even thinking about that moment, because somebody could just say that.
Yeah.
But you said it with such conviction, and like, that's what it was. You know what I mean? And that, dude, that resonates and hits, because I know how big that could be for a kid to look up to those, you know, they seem like superheroes. They're just larger than life and all that. And that's still, I still get that nostalgia when I see it on TV. So
yeah, very true.
How did you grow the love or the passion for that? Where did that ever come into play for you?
Yeah. So that started 25 years ago now. So basically in the early 2000s, late 90s, there was the Monday Night Wars between WCW and WWF at the time. And at the time, my parents didn't allow me to watch WWF because there's a lot more suggestive themes and so on and so forth going on WWF compared to the WCW. And on WCW, they also didn't let me watch all that much, but every single Monday night, they would specifically like allow me to watch Bill Goldberg, who at the time basically played this unbeatable superhero. Yep. And the NWO was hot at the time, and they're one of the most famous, if not the most famous, bad guy groups of wrestling history. And Goldberg was one of their main people that they intertwined with. And Goldberg was always notorious for beating people in 90 seconds, beating multiple people in 90 seconds, beating that entire bad guy group. And as a kid, you're very impressionable and you see that type of stuff. And I like to compare it to the stories that my dad told me, where he would get engulfed in comic books and truly believe that, you know, Superman was real, and you know, look up to Superman as a superhero, as this just immortal being of what a male figure should be like. And for me, watching pro wrestling as a kid, Goldberg was essentially that guy. And so seeing this ideal physique, to me, ideal intensity, ideal athleticism, ideal humility, and ideal impact on those that he was around, not only the adults in the crowd, but also very much so the kids. And I remember being 3 to 5 years old and seeing him come off after a victory, and after being super, super intense and just like going berserk, like brings himself down into a new character that then pulls a kid out of the audience, like puts him on the shoulders, gives the kid the belt. He did a lot of Make-A-Wish stuff as well. So seeing that now, fast forwarding 20 plus years later, I think about it for myself, and you know, I think about, why are certain people placed in your lives, or why do certain events happen in your lives? And I think about being impacted by Goldberg at such an early age. And for me, the ultimate reasoning that makes the most sense in my mind is to have been impacted by him, to then live and thrive in my life a certain way, to then get to a point to where I can pass off and do the same for other people, other children, and kind of do what he did for me. And I had my first taste of that when I was teaching jiu-jitsu for kids back home in Phoenix. TNT MMA Training Center is where I taught the kids class there. And I did that for about 8 or 9 months. And prior to that, you know, I didn't necessarily think that kids were a particular skill of mine. However, after spending 8 or 9 months with them and really developing a lot of really tight-knit relationships with them and the parents, it became very clear to me like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And me as an individual, I always try to strive to do things at an elite level. And so, you know, you have various ways to impact children, not one being any greater than the other. Teaching, you know, coaching youth sports, all these various ways. for me, the thing that makes the most sense, because I look back at my childhood at Goldberg, it's a matter of, okay, well, I want to do pro wrestling because that's the easiest way to fit into a superhero role that will then allow kids to look at me as the ideal male figure to then try to model themselves after.
Right.
And having a similar impact on that group of 40, 50 kids, if I thought to myself, if I could do that to 40 or 50 kids back home in Arizona, there's no reason why I can't do that to kids all around the world. I just got to work my ass off to get myself on a platform to be able to show what I have to offer. Right. So, and that's the pursuit that I'm currently in right now. So, and it's interesting because talking about this injury, and this is something that Claire reminds me of all the time, which is trusting God's path, trusting God's will, and just kind of leaning into that. And so being literally a week out of my match back home in Arizona, where I had this big incident that set up this big match in Arizona. I was going to be my Arizona debut. I obviously have a lot of friends and family back home. I also had a lot of good relationships with a lot of the kids that were fans of that particular organization. So there's a lot of big lead up to that. And then having the injury happen right before the big match and having to cancel that match and a bunch of other matches, quite frustrating to say the least, and also quite nerve-wracking from the standpoint of constantly wondering if I'm missing the time clock that I have to achieve this goal, because age is very much of the essence in this field, especially when you're just starting and especially when you're trying to make a name for yourself. And so for me, leaning into God, leaning into those around me, Claire, Matt here, they all keep me very as positive as I can. I'm a hell of a lot to deal with, to be quite honest with you. But as positive as I can be, and always focusing on the greater picture, and now kind of being past the hump of the surgery and getting to the point to where I can kind of start walking again, trying to reset this matchup here later this year, I'm just in a position to be very grateful that the kids that were there looking up to me then will be there in the future when this match comes, and then ultimately have the opportunity to build some momentum for myself to then kind of grow myself and get onto that bigger platform, WWE, AEW, acting even, whether being a superhero to kids is being a WWE champion or being a famous actor in a superhero movie. I don't know if I necessarily have a preference. I just know that I need to impact that first million and keep that ball going.
Let's go. Let's go. Bro, that's what's up. Dude, I remember, so my era of wrestling was a little bit before Goldberg, and so I remember coming up, and it was the Ultimate Warrior, Legion of Doom, the Rockers, all them, and my mother was a professor at the local university, Youngstown State, and so they would come around and do house shows.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't know what a house show was. I didn't know any of that stuff, but she used to bring us there, and because her office was in Beagley Center where the wrestling matches would happen, they would have to let us in. So it'd be me and a couple of my friends, and we'd have on our WWF shirts.
Hell yeah.
And the security would try to stop us, and then she'd flash her little badge, so they had to let us in. And then she'd take us down, and we get to meet the wrestlers.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
I just remember, just meeting them, and it was just larger than life, dude.
Yes.
Such an impact. And I'd get my WWF magazine, and I can remember, and I think I've shared this with you before, but I was in second grade. We were in the car, and we were driving from Columbus back to where we were from in Youngstown. And I looked over at my mom, and I said, "Mom, when I grow up, can I be a wrestler?" And she said, "Honey, as long as you go to college, you could be anything you want." And I didn't even hear the college part. I was just like,
"That's funny."
She said yes.
Yeah.
She said yes.
That's awesome.
And it was just so big, dude. So
yeah,
man, anybody that doesn't get wrestling or understand it, dude, flip it on one time and just take a look at those kids' faces in the audience.
Yeah,
that's all you need. That's all you need to know.
I think that pro wrestling is one of, if not the most relative way to draw that parallel between reality and a true superhero, villain type of realm, because it's not cartoons, it's not special effects, it's legitimate real people doing legitimate real things, but obviously you have that cinematic drama to it, but it's real enough to believe, especially when you're watching people that are actually really, really talented at it. And that's where over the last couple of years of doing it, I've come to really respect the talent that it takes to be able to make it look as easy as a lot of these people do.
Right, yeah.
So that's great. And also to that point, I've noticed that every single person that I've ever brought to a wrestling event, had they not watched wrestling or been a fan of before, at the very least, they'll admit that it's very entertaining to watch in person, which a lot of times once they see it in person, it becomes much more relative to watch on TV. That's my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I remember getting into high school, and then that's when the Monday Night Wars were going on and all that. And I was always a WWE, WWF guy.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I hear about this dude, and I always liked Sting. He was always my guy
Sting's
over in
great.
WCW. But then I heard about this dude Goldberg coming
Mm-hmm.
out, and bro, I saw his entrance one time, and I was sold. I was like, "Who
Yeah.
is this dude?
Yeah.
Just so intense,
Iconic.
dude, coming through the sparks,
Yes.
and all that stuff, blowing the smoke." It was just like, man,
Yeah.
this dude right here.
Yeah.
So, believe it or not, I have a WCW belt, and one day,
You told me. Yeah, you told me.
one day Goldberg's going to come on this show, and I'm
Hell
going to get
yeah.
him to sign that thing. But
When he does, make sure I'm here.
all right,
He's not too far. He's like 30 minutes away. So
Goldberg,
Yeah.
if you're listening. So, dude, you're a hybrid athlete, and to me, in every sense of the word, you've got getting into wrestling, obviously, black belt in jiu-jitsu, bodybuilder, natural bodybuilder too,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yeah.
Bro, like that is and man, watching your content is such a breath of fresh air, because now, like, so many people with these huge followings, influencers, all that, you know, it looks cool on camera, but then when you follow somebody that truly knows the science behind everything and breaks it down in the way you do and explains exercises. You just did a post the other day about doing cable rows or whatever, and it just, you know, my mind exploded. I've done cable rows a million times, but hearing you say that, just look at it in a completely different way.
I appreciate it.
How did what in life gravitated you towards the science of bodybuilding or the science of working out and stuff like that?
So it started as, well, I started lifting when I was 5. Most people know that
5?
story. Yeah. So my dad started me really, really young, wanted me to start lifting to give me more confidence. It was a bonding thing for him and I.
Oh, so you were lifting with dad?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool,
Yeah, he
man.
got me started in the garage when I was 5 years old. That's the
awesome.
first time I ever touched a weight.
Do you have a picture of you lifting at 5 years old?
There was a camera that I did have where there's a couple pictures when I was like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
That camera has then ceased to exist, unfortunately. I think there's some pictures of me flexing when I was a kid. Definitely some pictures of my garage, like of the setup that we had. But I'll have to go look. I love to like find one. There's like just thousands of pictures because my mom's Filipino, so there's just clusters of photos everywhere. So I'd have to really go digging for you. But yeah,
if you do find them before this episode comes out, shoot them over, because I'd love to put them up.
Okay,
I could
I'll
see a
have
little
to.
5-year-old, 7-year-old you sitting there flexing.
I'll have to contact my mom on that one. But yes, yeah. So did that from age 5 up until age 14. And then my dad stopped lifting, and then I started basically just training myself off of the knowledge that I knew from him. And then after that, that's where my 2 best friends, one of them sitting right here, my business manager now, Matt, and then also my other best friend, Irving, started getting into lifting. And then I basically just took the principles that I learned from my dad and then started trying to pass it on to them. And they were my first 2 like coaching clients per se, but they're just training with me at the gym, you know? And then in high school, I did have a handful of people reach out to like write them diet plans or train them in this or write them a workout
Even
program.
in high school?
Yeah, because that's where I started to get a lot more respect. Definitely when I was stronger or had a different looking physique than a lot of my peers, especially once I was like in wrestling and I did bodybuilding. My first bodybuilding show was leading into my senior year. So after I won Mr. Teen Arizona in 2013, that's when I started to get a lot more attention per se for my physique or my strength or what have you. And then a lot of people started asking me for this. So, you know, in reality, I've been kind of asked to be in a coaching role on the lifting side of things for quite a while, but it didn't really resonate with me until after college, where I started working with a coach, and then I started to realize like, oh, there's an actual opportunity to make money in this, despite what I had heard from a lot of people prior to that, which led me to be a business major in college that I don't use. And so because of that, I started thinking to myself like, well, what if every single inquiry, like message that I ever got in coaching on Instagram or whatever, I actually turned into a client? Because before then I would just say, oh, no, I don't make money off of this, or, oh, I don't coach people, or, you know, yeah, I don't coach powerlifting or whatever. And then I basically, the idea dawned on me because we were selling clothes at the time for How Strong. That was like our main source of income for the business, which wasn't necessarily thriving necessarily. That if I start to transition a lot of these inquiries per se that I get on Instagram to a coaching business, that we could potentially make something that's profitable. And now, you know, humbly making more money than I ever have, thankfully. And also, too, with that said, making enough money to pay him full-time to quit his full-time job where he was making the most money that he ever had, which is an honor. And then bringing on my 3rd friend here in the next month. There's 4 owners for our How Strong team. They're all my best friends. And one of my goals moving to Austin was be able to build my business big enough to be able to take care of them fully, to get them fully paid by the business, which is all predominantly in-person coaching, online coaching, virtual coaching, workout programs, nutrition programs, so on and so forth. And because of that, to answer your original question, you start to get a little bit more engulfed in, okay, if I'm going to be in a coaching role and there's people that I at one point knew more than, but I didn't take lifting serious enough yet to actually really understand the hows and whys and so on and so forth. That's where a few years ago, that's when I started to get really serious on my ability to comprehend, receive, and articulate information at a very fast rate. I did it in jiu-jitsu for such a long time, which is why I progressed in jiu-jitsu relatively quickly. So then I just kind of took that same skill and mindset towards jiu-jitsu and applied it towards lifting. But the main difference is I could expedite that process because I had been lifting since I was 5. So now it's just a matter of thousands of repetitions. Now I'm just putting vocab terms on top of things and understanding things that I've been doing for a long time in a little bit more depth. But I will say, though, that once I started taking coaching seriously, that's where my interest had sparked enough to start diving down different realms of fitness that I once before wasn't super into, such as mobility or even bodybuilding from a scientific sense. Powerlifting was what I competed in for a long time because I really liked the strength output aspect. But as far as the best way to build muscle, the best way to break down muscle, the best way for technique wise, how to do a technique in a certain way to put your body in position to build muscle in a certain body group or whatever. Same with powerlifting, like how do I understand leverages and body lengths and so on and so forth to maximize my strength and power into a certain lift. And same with mobility, like how do I leverage my body or positioning of wherever I place my leg or what have you to be able to now get into the splits. And then you start to see commonalities across the board, actually, between powerlifting, bodybuilding, mobility, calisthenics, where regardless of whatever strength you're pursuing, there's a lot of commonalities. And that's where this light bulb went off in my head. And I started to understand that lifting is actually really easy when you start to understand, like I said, the commonalities between concepts. So taking that and then the 5 years of teaching experience that I had in jiu-jitsu, I basically just kind of combined the two. And that's where I am very confident to say that I'm very confident in my coaching ability, both online but also in person, to be able to relay concepts to world-class athletes or somebody that literally just stepped into the gym.
Right.
And that's where I think in general, when it comes to coaching, no mention to myself, but just coaches in general, the best coaches are the people that can take concepts and explain them in relevance to world-class athletes, but also break it down without having to stroke my own ego to somebody that just got into the gym.
Right.
And understanding like what vocab or what depth of explanation is necessary for either or.
Right.
That's where I resonate with a lot of good coaches I have a lot of respect for that I've met or worked with, Phil Daru, Dr. Mike, Ben Patrick, guys like that are very smart, very experienced, work with a lot of high-level athletes and also a lot of regular people, but also are able to explain things in such a way that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
And that, to me, I love from the coaching aspect because it shows somebody has a lot of confidence and calmness and the knowledge that they've acquired over the years, and that they don't need to necessarily explain things a certain way to impress somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think, in your opinion, what are the 3 biggest misconceptions, like when clients come in, or like that they have about weightlifting or whatever? You know, that I'm sure you get the, I like doing high reps,
Right.
low weight to tone muscle and like stuff like that. What do you think are the biggest 3?
Yeah, so I would say in my experience, and this is coming from the specific niche of people that generally come to me, which is now jiu-jitsu athletes or pro wrestling athletes. I have some powerlifters, but not in person here. So a lot of my in-person experience actually is working with people that do some sort of physical activity outside of the gym itself. And so a lot of times, some of the misconceptions you have to kind of deal with early on are the concept of a certain lift or a certain movement pattern being quote unquote bad. Trying to explain to somebody that's been indoctrinated by the concept of, oh, knees over toes is bad, rounded back is bad, shoulder in this position is bad, so on and so forth, and trying to re-explain to them that there is no inherently bad position. There are just positions where our individual body is incapable of handling a certain level of resistance, in which case if you lessen the resistance and make things appropriate for that given individual, they'll be able to actually take something that's bad, such as a rounded back or a knee over toe or a shoulder like this, and actually make it quite advantageous and because of that fact, be much more durable in their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So that's like early on one of the biggest things, because a lot of times
you're making yourself strong in weak positions then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because some of the things that I talk about when it comes to people that are afraid to round their back, or maybe they'll be shocked when I tell them that we're going to round our back for this exercise, is they'll say that they have some sort of lower back issue or whatever. And that can come from hips, that can come from hamstrings, glutes. But also, with that said, if you have a weak lower back or a tight lower back, it's also a good idea to strengthen your lower back. But most people just stay away from that because their back hurts. So the thought of bending and extending is something that we stray away from. Mm-hmm. And so when I compare something to, okay, well, if you were to bend over and grab that basketball with a rounded back and pick it up, are you hurt? Yes or no? Usually no.
Right.
With that said, if that basketball becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds, and we start to do that 5-pound basketball for sets of 3 to 10 and do that over time, now that rounded back position starts to become, as you said, advantageous, and you become much more confident in your lower back, and your lower back starts to build some resiliency. However, if that basketball became a barbell that weighed 600 pounds and I asked you to deadlift it with a rounded back, you might come out with some concerning issues. But there's always this threshold where X individual is capable of lifting this much weight with this level of form or this particular form. And if you were to up the weight or up the difficulty, then obviously everybody, including myself, is going to have a breaking point. As a coach, it's my job to be able to relay and basically accurately assume where that threshold is for that given person so that we can always work within that, stay away from their max, but also work within a range that's difficult enough to actually get a stimulus so that they can get stronger, whether it's literal strength or mobility or building muscle. Like, all those things are very relative.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were into wrestling before jiu-jitsu?
Yes, in high school, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so then how did that ended up segueing into, number one, I wish if I could I put all my efforts into basketball, completely ignored the fact that I was white, can't jump.
For sure.
If I could do it all over again, I would have got into wrestling because I saw those dudes train and they were animals.
Yeah, definitely.
And then even now, like, I'll talk to a lot of the parents or something that I'm working with, and they'll have younger kids and they'll be asking me about getting them into the gym and all that. And I've rolled when I was in the military, which is limited. And we're not doing it every day by any stretch. We're just doing combatives. But I'll tell them, like, the people that I see that have do jiu-jitsu, just the calmness they walk around with, the confidence, and explaining to them, like, the whole thing around, like, UFC 1 and Hoist Gracie getting in there, and the reason that he was the littlest son, and that's why who's the dad? Who's Hoist's dad? Helio?
Yes.
Or whichever one. If I said the wrong one, I apologize.
Yeah.
But putting him in there because he was the smallest one to prove a point that it was superior to the other martial arts and stuff like that. And so I'm like, if your son or your daughter is undersized or anything and you want them to get into some self-defense, go to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, hands down. So how did that transfer from wrestling, and you're like, I want to try that?
Yeah, so martial arts was the only thing that I did before lifting. I started martial arts when I was 3.
Okay.
And that was just basic karate for the most part.
You've been an athlete since you came out the womb.
Yeah, I've been doing stuff basically. Jeez. My dad's been having me move for a long time. Yeah, for sure, most definitely, and I'm thankful for it too. Yeah. So I started martial arts at a really young age, and it was called Okinawa Te Karate, but basically like karate. Did a lot of tournaments and sparring tournaments and stuff like that, katas, sparring, so on and so forth. And then I picked up lifting when I was 5, and amongst that early martial arts journey, some of the things that I did was more specific, such as Aikido, but then Aikido led directly into Judo. Judo is also how I got my name, Jimmy. My real name's Charles, but then at the time I was going by James because I got bullied for the name Charles, so then I switched my name to James, but it's sensei in Judo called me Jimmy, sidebar. And anyways, I've stuck with it since. So, but Judo, as we know, is the derivative of martial arts that came before jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a byproduct of judo, essentially. And so that was kind of my first take of a grappling art. Yeah, so judo started in Japan, and then Japanese jiu-jitsu started in judo, but then they migrated to Brazil. That's where Brazilian jiu-jitsu was much more ground-oriented, where judo and Japanese jiu-jitsu is a little bit more oriented on throws and and stuff like that. But it still has the submission aspect as well.
Right.
But the judo that I did when I was 6 and 7 was the first taste of grappling that I did, or a form of. and then going into team sports for the remainder of my childhood mostly. And I mostly just did that because I enjoyed being with my friends. So whether it was baseball or football, I did dabble in basketball for a little bit. I was actually on my 7th grade basketball team. I was a bench warmer. The only thing that I've ever actually been a bench warmer in was basketball.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah. So
It wasn't for us.
Yeah, it wasn't for us, no. But with that said, after the team sports, I got into wrestling in high school because of a bad experience with my freshman football team. And then the wrestling in high school started because, well, backtrack. My 8th grade year, I decided not to do basketball because I didn't want to be a bench warmer. So then my best friend Irving suggested I do wrestling. So then I tried wrestling because I also, too, looked at the people training. I thought it looked really fun and really cool.
Yeah.
And it was something that I picked up pretty quickly just because I was naturally more natural with using somebody's body to manipulate it. It was just something that came naturally to me. So I enjoyed that and had a decent amount of success for the limited wrestling that we had available at the time. And then I wasn't really sure that I wanted to wrestle in high school, but then the football experience put me in a position where I definitely don't want to play football ever again, even though I thought that's what I wanted to do with my entire life. But maybe I give wrestling a go, but I'm actually pretty scared because I know high school wrestling is 10 times tougher. And that's where my dad came into play, and he said, basically like, well, how about you try it, and if you don't like it, then you don't have to do it, but why don't you just like see if you like it? And after a really shitty football season, going into wrestling, which is 10 times more difficult, but the difficult there was actually giving me a feeling of being rewarded. Like after a really hard workout, I felt completed and accomplished, and I felt like there was a reward at the end of it. And I also felt like that it didn't matter who was around me. My spot on that team was completely indicative of my skill level in comparison to those that were in my same weight class. And then once I got a varsity spot my freshman year, which I did not anticipate, and honestly, just to be completely transparent, the main reason why I got that varsity spot my freshman year was because the other person that was in my weight class just wasn't very good. But what it did allow me to do was get competition against varsity wrestlers around the state. And by the end of the freshman season, I was like 50-50 basically, but it did put me as the #1 ranked freshman in varsity for my weight class. So then I looked at those stats and I was like, if I dedicate the next 3 years of my life to wrestling, there's a chance that I could actually win state at something. That was the coolest thing in my head. Because you watch movies growing up as a kid where there's high school teams and everyone wants to be a state champion and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I saw that like, oh, if I work really, really hard at this one thing and dedicate everything to this one thing, that there's a chance that I could actually win state. That was the coolest thing ever. So I dropped football in a heartbeat. So then after that, that's exactly what I did. I dedicated everything to wrestling, and junior year was actually the first year where I actually put a goal on my bedroom wall. Claire saw it the last time when she was in Arizona, but I put, finish top 6 in the state of Arizona as a junior. And I went the whole summer, lost a bunch of weight, got really lean, did a lot of wrestling. And by the end of that, after not qualifying for state the year before, I came to the state the next year, and I got 5th in state, which then had me as a #1 ranked senior in my weight class coming into my senior year. And I started my senior year 40-0. And then I had a lot of unfortunate events happen towards the end, which then caused me to which then eclipsed with a concussion that prevented me from wrestling at a state tournament my senior year. So then seeing 2nd through 6th place being people that I had all beat, and the person who won being somebody that never wrestled before, there was a part of me that felt closure, because I knew that had I had a little bit more, a better situation, I could have accomplished that goal of being a state champion. But then because of that unfortunate event, I didn't really want anything to do with wrestling, let alone grappling. So then I just went straight into powerlifting. And I did a handful of things in powerlifting after high school. But the problem with that, though, was I went from 195 pounds in high school, 190 pounds in high school, and for the next two and a half years, ate fast food nearly twice a day, like every single day, and lifted 3 to 4 times a week without doing any form of cardio whatsoever. So I went from that weight all the way up to 270.
That's bad.
Well, yeah.
That's what I've been practicing the past 3 years.
Well, at 5'8", it's a little bit different story.
Right.
So, yeah. So I got up to 270. So then that's when, like, Dan, I really do not like how I look right now. So that's when I decided that I needed to lose some weight, in which case The only way that I've ever historically enjoyed losing weight, which is actually probably part of my issue right now why I'm not leaner than I am, is when I'm doing some sort of grappling, whether it's wrestling or whatever. I always lose weight super fast because it's a super easy way to burn a lot of calories and also motivate yourself, learn an incredible skill simultaneously. And it motivates me in particular to stick to a diet when I'm like regimen and doing wrestling or jiu-jitsu training. Yeah. Right. So that's when jiu-jitsu came into play. So after starting jiu-jitsu, went from 270 to 190 in a year and a half, and then did a pretty decent job of keeping it all off. I've been at or around 200 pretty much ever since, for the most part, outside of like one time where I was chasing some really high powerlifting numbers. I got up to 250 again, but I lost it. Right. Yeah. But anyways, I say this because the wrestling led into jiu-jitsu simply because I wanted to lose weight. Right. But then when I started jiu-jitsu, I realized that, oh, maybe this could be my second chance at reviving what I felt I lost in wrestling. And in a lot of ways, it was. There was definitely some goals that were left on the table because of a knee injury that's not even this one, that brought me here, that then made me realize maybe my life is meant for an even bigger picture, which is where the pro wrestling and acting comes into play. And everything happens to our life for a reason. Jiu-jitsu, had it not had its place, I wouldn't even be here talking to you about these particular goals, because jiu-jitsu is really what allowed me to separate myself in the fitness or health community or combat community as somebody that is multifaceted, but that is somebody that can also coach as well. Yeah. So anyways, all of that to say that the wrestling was jiu-jitsu because I got fat. Yeah.
So I got three things for you. One, you're a perfect guest for this show because, dude, you've been through some adversity and you found your redemption. It seems like everything you've got in, something's happened to stop it, and you've just continued to persevere through it.
Thank you.
And that's a beautiful thing.
I appreciate it.
So many people, I know you know, so many people, they hit one roadblock and they're done. They're done going to the gym, they're done rolling, they're done this. And so to see you persevere through time after time, bro, that's what separates, you know what I mean, the men from the boys.
I appreciate it.
You talking about the state championship thing, man, that resonates with me so much because basketball was my first passion in life. It was my identity. It was everything. And so I left the school in Ohio to go over into Pennsylvania to play for a Catholic school. Okay. They'd win state every year. My goal was to play college ball. Yeah. And I go over there, and that was, you know, played my sophomore year, going into my junior year. I'm like getting really excited about, you know, I've been at the school a little while. People are starting to know me. And so I'm trying to move my way up. And then on my way to school one morning, I get into a car accident. And I'm not wearing a seatbelt. Really? Yeah. Blew out my left knee, cracked my right kneecap in half.
Jesus.
Broke my jaw, had my jaw wired for 12 weeks, cracked my sternum, bruised my lungs, damaged a nerve in my left eye.
Really? That bad, huh?
Dude, it was bad. I was no seatbelt, out over the hood of the car. Wow. The tree had ripped through, the engine dropped, the tree had ripped through. It was sitting in the cab of the SUV. Really? Yeah. I mean, I was lucky to be alive. Yeah. And so that happened just as the basketball season is about to start. And so I go, and my jaw is wired shut, and we're starting to get to the point where we're getting ready to go to the playoffs. And so I'm trying to come back. And dude, my jaw was wired. So I had lost a tremendous amount of weight, because I'm sitting there having to eat liquids all the time. And so I still tried to get, you know, back out there. And I remember going to get my jaw unwired because I couldn't play until the jaw was unwired. And I go in there, and they're like, it's not ready. You know, you have to keep it wired for another couple weeks. And I went home and I clipped the wires. Really? Yeah. And so it looked like I had braces because of all the things on my teeth. And I go, and second quarter comes up. And I go in the game, first play, I drive down the middle of the lane, pump fake, go up, and a dude swings and busts my nose. No way. And so then I'm done for that year. But that right there, that accident for the young man that I was, it changed the trajectory of my life, and not in a good way, because I lost basketball right there. My basketball career was pretty much done. There wasn't anything I was going to do. Yeah. And so then I went and gravitated towards, you know, where I could be accepted, which just happened to be the party crowd. And then anybody that listens to the podcast knows the rest with that. But, you know, seems like I took the left and you took the right, you know what I mean? You continued to persevere through it, and I didn't. So, but just knowing that dream as a young kid to battle back to, you know, to try to be a state champion and all that. And then, you know, I just sit there and watch my team go on and win state, and I'm sitting there in the crowd like, God damn, you know what I mean? Like, I'm jealous, I'm mad at them for winning, you know what I mean? So many emotions as a kid. Right. So, dude, that hits me in such a way. And then the last thing that I had with what you were saying was I do interventions. And so I had done one recently on a 15-year-old boy. And sad story, he's getting high with his mom. And so I spoke with the dad, and the dad wanted me to get him out of there. And so all the cards were stacked against me, but I ended up getting him out. And so I had to actually fly him to another state to get him to treatment. And I didn't know that this was a thing, but I guess he's like kind of on the spectrum. So he doesn't pick up like facial cues or social cues and stuff like that. And so I didn't know that then. But I mean, you think about why would kid's getting in trouble, he's doing hard drugs and doesn't really have many friends or anything like that. And I didn't know why. But if you think this kid can't communicate like the rest of us, and so it's got to be difficult. But good kid, man. I spent a lot of time with him in the airport and flying him there. And I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to dig in and see like what makes him tick. What's he into? What's he like? And he found out I did a podcast. He found out I had some UFC fighters on. He was all excited. Nice. And so I was like, man, what are you into? And he goes, wrestling. And I was like, oh, cool. Like WWE wrestling? He goes, no, real wrestling. Oh, okay. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah. And so this kid wants to get into wrestling so bad. And so I promised him, I was like, bro, you go here, you handle your business, you do what you got to do. And I promise you, when you come back here, I will get you plugged in with somebody and we're going to get you into that world, whether it's going to a school or camp, something like that. We're going to get you in that. So I would love to introduce you to him as long as he gets his shit together.
Let's do it.
His stuff together. And then I'd love to bring him to meet you because he'd be ecstatic.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And dude, just seeing a kid like that and knowing the impact basketball had on me, the impact running or the gym has on me, the impact all the athletics you've done, I just want to give that to this kid. You know what I mean? Like hopefully that's that one thing he needs to just pour into and kind of get his life where it needs to be.
Yeah, I love that. That'd be amazing.
For sure. So the jiu-jitsu, if you had to pick one, if you had to pick one between jiu-jitsu, bodybuilding, and wrestling, what would you pick? One for the rest of your life.
Wrestling, like pro wrestling? Or
yes, pro wrestling.
Yeah, that's tough. I was having a hard day not too long ago, and I was talking to her about like what I think I would really be doing if I wasn't aiming my goals towards the service of so many people around me, both close and far. I'd probably just be doing jiu-jitsu full time, to be honest. Like if I had to just pick just one, I'd probably just be doing jiu-jitsu. Like jiu-jitsu is one of the few things in life that has given me such a pure sense of enjoyment and motivation and has allowed me to do the things that I like doing, whether it's impact kids or teach others or work out or these various things, learn valuable skills, where it kind of has all that together. So if it was just like one thing, it'd probably be jiu-jitsu, 100%. That's the first time I've ever said that out loud. But also, with that said too, from the pro wrestling standpoint, from the standpoint of if I'm as married to my goals as I claim that I am, that has to be the answer. Not because I don't like pro wrestling or anything like that. I love pro wrestling. And actually, ever since doing my first match, I really enjoy being able to show what's inside here out in the ring, because I don't get to do that all that much. But as far as selfishly, jiu-jitsu. But I am also very thankful that because I try to not be selfish that much, that has allowed me to pursue something like pro wrestling, which I also quite enjoy, to then build even more dedication and passion towards the idea of being a superhero to millions of kids, which is much more important than what I selfishly want. Right. So that's a hard question because
I get what you're saying. For sure.
Jiu-jitsu is tried and true.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu could be your first love, but your passion and your purpose is something bigger, which happens to be wrestling.
Yeah, it's like selfish versus purpose, right? And sometimes they can be together. Yeah. But that would be like my honest answer.
That's not a bad answer. Don't feel guilty for saying it.
Yeah.
No, that's what's up. Someone that is so motivating, someone that is so inspiring, like yourself, where do you draw your inspiration from? Like me, I'll tell you like I'm a competitive person. And so I've found recently within these past couple of years, what really makes me tick is surrounding myself around people that are way better than me. Yeah. Because I never want to be the worst. I never want to be the weakest, the slowest in anything. And so most of the time people don't even know we're in competition. But to me, I see people that motivate me and it makes me raise my bar. And so like, who are those or what is that for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to answer that question because you could say the answer is simply how or who raised me growing up, how they raised me, the mindset of constantly pursuing and going after the next thing or the next greater thing, as to why I feel almost electronically programmed to just constantly try to chase something bigger than what I'm already doing, to my own detriment sometimes. But also, with that said, another way to answer that is simply knowing that I'm very grateful to say that I'm in a spot that a lot of other people wish that they could be in, whether it's coaching or athletically, or even just the people I've been able to be around since pursuing these different things. But also knowing that, but also from a daily basis feeling like I'm just honestly nowhere close to whatever I'm supposed to be doing. Like, and that can be connotated in a negative way from a standpoint of just, I don't feel like I've done much of anything yet, to be honest. But also from the standpoint of, because I feel that way a lot of the time, I relentlessly and aggressively pursue this imaginary goal somewhere up in the sky that I'm going to be this superhero that wears a cape that gets to be in that role, or I die at some point in the pursuit. But those are really the two options. And I'm just so crazy and engulfed into this pursuit that it's just, there's no other option for me at this point. So as far as what drives me, what motivates me, it's realizing that I'm so far in to this thing already that how do I even go back if I wanted to? Like, I don't even know how that would even be possible. Like, I'm going to start using my degree for something, let's do that. 6 years too late. It's just, at this point now, I've built so much momentum and I've done so many things for those around me that I think I'm getting closer and closer to being able, I always say this to my friends, once I take care of you three, I'll be able to fly and spread my wings and go to where I'm meant to go next. So that's where the business focus the last handful of months since this knee injury has picked up drastically, because, okay, well, I can't do wrestling physically, but I can build a business up so that I can fulfill that manifestation that I made a couple years ago when I said I was going to get my friends paid by my business and prove all their parents wrong. I can do that, and I'm about 3/4 of the way there as is. Yeah, so if I can get that goal out of the way, then I can start to let God and my own drive and dedication get me to where I'm meant to go next. And I have a few ideas of where I'd like that to be, but I think ultimately that's where focusing on what you deem your purpose to be. Sure, God knows only what that is, but you take certain things and you listen to certain messages, or you see certain things that happen in your life repeatedly or without explanation, and you start to get a better idea of like what direction you're meant to go in at the very least. And then with that, that's how I've been able to define what my purpose is. So that's where I just blindly chase this thing. Like, there's no other choice.
Dude, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. It's funny getting into the gym. I remember seeing a meme and it perfectly encapsulates the feeling I get. But I saw a meme and it said, this is it showed a picture of the statue of David or something. And it said, me when I decided I was going to start going to the gym to achieve the physique of a Greek god. And then the other side said, me when I realized all I did was give myself a horrible case of body dysmorphia. And so it's this thing where I tell people all the time, and it could be healthy, it could not be, but everything I do is with a chip on my shoulder. This 7 years sober, I still feel like I have something to prove to the world. I still feel like I need to prove people wrong. And so that's what like keeps me going. And that's where like, dude, I've been to the gym before with my back completely thrown out when I had to like hold myself up on equipment, but it was still that I'm going to fucking get there no matter what. Right. My workout might be shit, probably didn't build any muscle, but I'm going to get there no matter what. And that's what keeps me going. And so I do all that and wonder like why did all this stuff happen to me? Like, what got me here? How did all this stuff happen? Like, I should be dead. Shouldn't be here. And all I know is everything in my life I've ever tried to like control goes to shit. It's never good for me. And then, you've said a couple times with God, and that was like a hard concept for me to get for a long time up until 7 years ago. But then again, very recently, like renewed faith and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And all I know, man, is as soon as I let go and I'm just like, man, I'm just going to keep doing me. I'm just going to keep trying to help people and put positivity in the world, because for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that I feel like I was meant to do. Yeah. Whether that's training people in the gym, whether it's doing this podcast, going to speak places, working with people in recovery. in some form or facet, I'm meant to use all this pain and everything to help people. And so I'm just going to keep doing it. And all I know is good things keep happening.
Hell
and you know what I mean? That's how the podcast happened. That's how I met you guys. You're here today, like all these things. And so it's like, I don't know if it's the right way or the wrong way, but it's working, and I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
What, if you don't mind me asking, I don't want to pry too deep, but what was it that kind of renewed that faith for you?
So a lot of times when I get asked this question, I don't go into too deep of detail out of respect for those involved.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that there is a point in my life when I was just turning 20 where I was completely hopeless. And after everything in my power that I did to try to fix a situation, I had no other choice but to essentially get desperate and rely on God and ask God and talk to God and connect with those that were very strong in their relationship with God, because everything that I had tried up to that point was working fucking horribly. And after that point, whether it was God or coincidence, I'll go with the side of God, simply because after I had just basically just completely said, I can't do shit in this situation, I'm going to give it up to him. And after that, that's when things in that moment started to get better. And after that, that's pretty much all I needed to acknowledge that, okay, there's something going on here. I was a little bit hesitant to completely just be like, oh yeah, that was it. That was him or whatever we're going to call it. But I did start to become more open-minded to it, because I was in a state of complete desperateness, and I came out of it better than what I thought I was going to get into had I not done that. And so anyways, I say that now because it opened my mind up to the idea, and I just had all these crazy events happen in the years following that, such as meeting my childhood hero Goldberg, such as having Goldberg get me tickets to SmackDown, and then having his scene with The Fiend, rest in peace, but the scene with The Fiend, and then he walks off, but as soon as the cameras go off air, he goes out from the locker room back towards the ring to not do anything in the ring but give me a hug and hold my face and say, I love you. So at that point, after being exposed to him as a 3-year-old and envying the kids that he would hold up and give a hug on the other side of the barricade, although I was 22 at the time, 22, 23, I felt like a 3-year-old in my 23-year-old body. And you'll have to like plug the video, but basically, you know, he gives me a big hug. My friend Irvin came in clutch with the video, like literally the second it happened, because, you know, he had gone off. And we're like, oh, that was so sick, you know. Oh, my God. It was the first time I ever saw Goldberg live.
No clue that he's coming back.
Yeah, not at all. And I was completely content with just seeing him live. He got me, you know, front row seats, and we're like right there. It was great. And he like got on the turnbuckle, and he pointed at me, and I was over the moon. I couldn't ask for anything else. And I sat down like, dude, that was sick. And then he's like, dude, he's coming back. I'm like, no fucking way. And then you just see his bald head peeking over the stands and everything. And if you watch wrestling, so anytime somebody comes back, they're coming to do something, attack somebody, say something on the mic. So the whole stadium's watching whatever the hell he's about to do. And then he comes up and gives me a hug, and you see it like I just lose it entirely, like almost like I just said a deadlift PR, like, and I sat down and I started crying, just like all these emotions. And that, of the top 2 or 3 best days of my life, truly, like that was where I was like, yeah, dreams do come true.
Wow.
And because of that day, amongst several others at this point, but because of that day, like first off that day, that's another reason why I will never stop pursuing this stuff that I've married myself to, the goals, the purpose, the stuff that I owe to the people in the world that deserve my help. That's why I will never give up on that, because that special moment was all I needed to know that, yeah, this is not coincidence. I'm being led very specifically because, you know, sure, like there's a lot of great people on earth, and Goldberg isn't the only one, but so specifically does this one individual that had an impact on me as a 3-year-old gets put in my life literally 20 years later, when he should have been retired from wrestling a long time ago. In theory, he took a 12-year break, comes back at this ideal time in my life where I needed some hero during that time where I was praying desperately. He comes back, he makes his little run, and all of a sudden, because of CT Fletcher, now he knows who I am, and then he gets me tickets to SmackDown when he's in town, and then he does that. That's all I need to know that I'm meant to do something special with my life.
Right. Dude, that's the power of purpose right there. Like when somebody discovers purpose, it's life-changing, it's transformative, and there's nothing getting in your way. Man, For me, like when it comes to faith and all that stuff, like I said before, for whatever I grew up, had been to church. Went to my father left when I was 2, so I was in Catholic school for a little bit. My mom wanted me to have structure, so I was familiar with church and all that. And then just through addiction, I just had lost it all. And so the one thing for me, as far as my recovery story went, running became so huge. Running changed my life. It put me in touch with these amazing people, right?
Okay.
And so, but like I said, I wasn't a big God guy. And so this story kind of is what let me know that without a doubt, like God is real and there's something bigger looking out for me. And so I was getting kicked out of the military. I was getting kicked out of the Army. I'd failed a urinalysis for heroin. And so I ended up in my first treatment center. And so I ended up in a treatment center in Austin, and my goal was not to get sober. I was trying to get out of trouble. Okay. I wasn't there for the right reasons. And so going to the treatment center, and I ended up meeting this kid in there. He's 6-7 years younger than me. And much like me, we're in there talking shit, talking to girls, cutting up in the groups, doing everything we shouldn't be doing. So he's my rehab homie. And then along the way, I start talking to a girl inside of the treatment center, which is a cardinal rule you don't ever do. Definitely not where you want to meet your significant other. But so we end up dating. I end up with her, and we get out of treatment, live together. Okay. The most toxic 2-year relationship ever. And so then I start getting in trouble with the law. And so I end up getting locked up for possession of heroin. So I go away. I'm locked up for 2 years, but I figure once I go, it's like, man, I'm good. My girl's going to hold me down. All my homeboys are going to hold me down. Not a person held me down. She didn't write me a letter. She didn't put money on my books. Yeah. This is the delusion I was living in of addiction. And so I do 2 years, and I get out, and I make the logical drug addict decision that I need to look the girl up. I got to see what she's up to because I'm lonely. And so come to find out, she's with my young buddy now from the treatment center. They're together. Yeah. Damn. And so I start texting her, and she starts texting me back. And we're going back and forth, and then she's sneaking behind his back to come see me. It was this whole messy thing. So he finds out about me, and then he's texting me, and we're talking shit back and forth, and I'm always trying to get him to come meet me to fight. And it would never happen. And so one night I had enough, and I found out where his apartment was, and it's in this gated community in Austin. And I go hop the fence, and I go up to the door, and I'm knocking out the door. I'm trying to get him to come outside. And now we were all sick at the time. I'm not sure about her now, but I think she loved the fact that there were 2 guys getting ready to fight over her. So she was kind of egging the situation on. And so for whatever reason, he wouldn't come out and fight. And so she ends up packing her stuff up, and she comes with me. And so I have this grand plan that we're going to move to Temple, Texas. And because there's this big VA there, that I'm going to be able to go there and get sober, and everything's going to be fine, which is delusional. So we go there, we drive to Temple, and I get the first little crackhead motel I can find, cheap place, and we get it. And all of a sudden, she starts unpacking her stuff, and out comes a laptop, and out comes an iPad, out comes a cell phone, all this electronic stuff that I knew she didn't have the money for. It wasn't hers. And so one thing I never got down with my entire addiction was stealing. It was always just bad karma for me. I never did it. And so I didn't ever have any problem with him other than the girl. And now I have the girl back. So in my book, him and I are good. Right. And so I call him up, and I was like, hey man, I got your stuff. I don't want it. I'm not going to pawn it. You're more than welcome to come get it. And so he ends up sending his mother to come pick up this stuff because he thought I was setting him up. Now, why you would send your mom to someone you think is setting you up, I don't know, but that's what it was. Very nice woman. Dude, it's night in the back of this creepy motel. And so I come out, I give her the stuff, that was that. And so now fast forward 3 years later, I end up in Austin, Texas. I'm back in treatment, still trying to get sober. I'm in all this trouble with the law. And I remember taking a look in the mirror when I was in the treatment center, and I had just got done doing another treatment for like 8 months, inpatient. And so now I had checked myself into another 6-month treatment center because I was really trying to get sober. I was willing to do whatever it took. So I remember looking in the mirror one day, and I'm 8 months sober, and I hated who I saw. I was an athlete growing up. I'd let myself go. I had a gut out to here. I felt like crap. I looked like crap. I was just miserable. And so I wanted to lose some weight. And so I found out about a little running group that met in downtown Austin early in the morning. And so I got special permission to go to this run group. And so I start going to this run group, and I show up, and it's a bunch of men and women. It's like 5 a.m., and we're going to run 2 miles that day. And I remember showing up, and my ego was huge. And I'm like, oh, they don't got nothing for me. Like, I'm going to beat all these people. I'm an athlete. I was dead last at the run that day. I was still smoking a pack of Newports.
Really?
Yeah, dude, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Lungs on fire, but I got done and I had just felt this sense of accomplishment that it had been longer than I can remember that I had felt that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to keep coming back. And so every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'd go there and run. And so I ended up hearing about this woman. Her name is Penny. And she runs these things called ultra marathons. And I didn't even know what those were. And then I found out and I was like, people what? People go run 100 miles?
Right.
Like, I didn't even know that was humanly possible.
Yeah.
So I hear about this woman and I seek her out and I start asking her, will you please train me up for a race? Like, I'm hearing about trail running, ultra running. I want to try it. I got bored of road running pretty fast. And so she's like, yes, absolutely. So she starts taking me out on the trails and we're out in the hill country and we're going all over. And so she's training me up for a race. And she's training me up for a race and she's teaching me like how to run on trails. Like, you got to be able to run down the side of a mountain full speed, you know what I mean, with loose rocks and roots. And so she's teaching me all this and we're chatting and I'm telling her my story, you know what I mean? I'm very open with it. And so I'm telling her I got kicked out of the military, you know, heroin addict, went to prison. And so I start telling her about when I went to treatment for the first time.
Yeah.
And I ended up telling her about, you know, got involved with this girl. And through the story, I end up saying her name. And she has a very unique name for a girl. It's not one you hear every day. And as soon as I said her name, my friend Penny's running and she just kind of stopped in her tracks and she looks over at me and she goes, do you know my son? And I was like, who's your son? Her son was my young homeboy from that treatment center.
Really?
She was the mother that had come pick up that stuff off me 3 years before.
Wow.
Now think for a second.
Yeah.
How many ways that story could have went down where
Seriously.
him and I could have fought. Somebody could have got killed. Somebody could have got hurt. I could have robbed the mom. Like, that was the one honest thing I did in my entire addiction was give that stuff back.
Right.
Still to this day, don't know what compelled me to do it. But that woman introduced me to an avenue and path that literally, and an outlet that saved my life. She introduced me to people that are still some of my best friends to this day, this supportive community. And so what is the chances that something like that would happen? And I would leave a city that has millions of people, it's still growing every day, leave it for years and come back and get plugged in with that one person that would introduce me to that avenue.
Right.
And so, bro, that's to me, that's too astronomical in numbers to not be God.
Literally.
If that's not something else looking out for me, then I don't know what it is. So,
because you went back to get the girl. Right.
worst mistake for any guy. Don't do that. I mean,
well, it served a purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything happened how it should. But man, that story is what let it know in my heart, and it's taken me even a while since then to like fully embrace. Because like, you know, I'll be honest. Like, I felt like it felt corny to say like, oh, I believe in God or I go to church and stuff like that. Because you'll meet some people that, like, you know, their faith is so strong, they kind of push it on you a little bit. And so I never, you know, I was just like, oh, I can't say that, I can't do that. And man, once I just put all that stupid stuff down and the ego down and embraced it, dude, it's been life changing. And so it's funny how every episode, you can ask Jason, every episode God comes up. It's good. And again, dude, it's a God thing. Why is it always come up with people that I never thought when we sat down that would be a topic, but there's a reason it always comes up. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I myself have very much tried to be much more vocal about it, for sure.
Now I am.
I've been around a lot of people that have had mentorish type roles to me that were very much against it. And so for a long time, I hid the thought that I even like contemplated the idea that I might actually like believe in it, because I didn't want to be ridiculed in the specific environment that I was in. But being out of that environment, it's, I don't know, what's the alternative, and if it really all doesn't exist, like what does it do negatively to the next person that doesn't believe? That's how I see it. And so at the end of the day, I don't know, who gives a fuck? Like just literally say whatever you want and whatever you want to believe and whatever you want to pursue and what your goals are, what your dreams is. Who gives a fuck? Yeah. Because you owning that will get you way further in your pursuit to get to where you want to go than it will for the hater that's talking shit behind a computer screen or in the lobby of some gym somewhere, whatever, you know? Right. So it is what it is. And that's where, like, with that being said, it's good that you do that, because I believe that gets you closer and closer to where you're destined to be. Same with myself and same with those around me. Right. Yeah.
I have to believe, you know, everything happens for a reason, and like the world's been crazy. The world's been crazy these past couple of years, and I'm not trying to get political, but you know, the world, it seemed like swung one way, like to this extreme level. And I think in a way that one of the blessings to come out of it is so many people, especially high profile people, you know, you're watching the Olympics right now and people where it's people talking about that on TV, you know what I mean? Professional football players, basketball players, you know, there's no shame in it. And them, you know, giving glory to that. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad that that's been a byproduct to happen, even though the world's been so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's so common to see that, and sometimes it just comes off as like something that you're supposed to say, but to me there's a reason why they're up there for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but that's definitely one of the reasons why they are on a platform to even be able to mention it.
Right. So one of my favorite questions to ask, I ask it to almost every guest, and normally I frame it as if tonight you're going to walk out for the UFC Championship of the World, but I'm asking you, you're walking out to the Heavyweight Championship of the World at WrestleMania.
Okay.
What is your walkout song? What's your fight song that gets you going? Now, I know you're going to have your own song, but if you had to pick a song that everybody would know, what's that one song that gets you going like nothing else?
Yeah, so it's a good question because, and if in WWE, they would have your own thing. And there's a lot of songs, to be quite honest with you. I don't even know if I pinpoint it down to one. Goldberg.
You're walking out for the Jiu-Jitsu Championship of the world.
Well, actually, you know, I know how to answer this. My 2 posing routines for bodybuilding shows are both Goldberg's theme song.
Okay.
I've done a handful of super fights where I come out to Goldberg's theme song. So if it's not Goldberg's theme song, then it's this one Tupac song that I heard about earlier this year from my friend Nick. He just sent it my way, and I don't really vibe with the lyrics, but I like the beat quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what it is?
It's We Ride on Our Enemies by Tupac. Yeah.
Good beat.
Yeah.
Definitely a good beat.
Yeah, I love that beat. Yeah, the beat's like really motivating. So anyways, I think I want to use at least the beat to my entrance. I just got to find a way to cut out some of the wording in it. It might not resonate with the children.
Right. You gotta get a homeboy to like make a remixed version of that beat and like make it yours.
Yeah. I don't even know where to go to start, so I'll have to figure that out. Write it down, man.
Need to find an editor. So what does fun look like for you today? Like when you're away, when you're not training, when you're not doing any of that, and you and Claire just hanging out or whatever, like what's fun look like for you? What do you go do to release?
Yeah, honestly, just
train.
Claire and I eat a lot of food.
Let's go. That's always a good thing.
Food sometimes with Matt, but so much of Matt and I together now is just more business related. But we have such a strong brotherhood that business, friendship, whatever, it's X amount of hours. After X amount of hours, get the fuck away from me.
Right.
You know, but I do enjoy hanging out with my girlfriend, and we have a lot of good times together. But one thing that I've always said is whether it's my line of work or the goals that I pursue, it gives me this aspect of being social, whether it's with my individual clients or those around me in a particular gym setting. And I've always been able to fill that cup without having to necessarily seek out specific social settings that I don't really feel all too comfortable in. I'm generally an introvert. I'm actually quite an introvert, to be honest with you. I can speak when it's my time to speak, but generally, like if it's not my time or there's no direct reason to, you probably won't find me talking. Like when I was at your house, it was pretty quiet.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, with that said, I get a lot of that fulfilled with training people, being in a gym environment, pro wrestling, being in a team environment. That's all great. That's all fun to me. Training is super fun to me, even though I take it very seriously. And pursuing my goals is also super fun to me, which is where like that should be the basis of all goals that we're pursuing, to be quite honest. So yeah, I get all that filled up, and whatever extra time that there is for other forms of fun that are not directly for goals would be getting food with Claire, hang out with Claire, hang out with my friends, whatever, stuff like that. Like really basic.
Hanging out with Claire's a respectable hobby. I dig it. So let's say there's somebody, could be a kid, somebody your age, my age, something like that. They're listening to your story and they're going through a tough time. What's your advice you give them? They hear your story, they're inspired, but they can't ask you. So what would you tell them?
Quite a bit. I think it starts with always see if you can make it to the next day and like live by that. So when one day seems hopeless, or one day seems how the fuck am I going to pull myself out of this, see if you can make it to the next day. That's my general answer to that.
I like it.
And just do that every single day.
Yeah. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that for myself. outside of that, I always find that constantly pursuing this imaginary, delusional, bigger purpose that I've yet to even directly define pulls me out of those spots. So when your goals and your sights and your current state of mind is only so big, dream bigger, think bigger, chase bigger. And when you're in a shit spot, you can take 5 seconds to a minute to 5 minutes of your time to think about what could that bigger be for me, and how can I start pursuing that and get my mind away from this? Do I need this situation? Do I really need to be a part of this situation? And if your answer is no, because most of the time it is, then just put your energy and focus and whatever you're dealing with currently. For me, a lot of that dealt with has turned into a ridiculous amount of intensity, a ridiculous amount of aggression, a ridiculous amount of passion. And thankfully, I've been able to harbor that and harness that into something that's positive and self-serving, but also people-serving.
Yeah.
And to those people that are, or kids that are dealing through that, it's always hard when you feel like you're going through it alone. And it's always hard when you feel like you have nobody to talk to. That's where people like Goldberg in my life has done so much more for me than I've actually been able to talk to him about it, which is pretty cool. But I can't even put into words to him directly, like the stuff that he's done for me to get me through hard times, to be able to channel into this literal superpower that I think I have, where I can turn myself into Goldberg on a fly and I can just like get over whatever the hell is going on in that specific moment. So having somebody or something like that to be able to help you get through stuff like that is really cool. And then now being in a point now to where you realize that even though it feels like you're alone, there's a good chance in most cases that you're probably not alone if you're willing to speak to those that truly give a shit about you.
Yeah.
And that's where these two individually have come through so much for me in the recent months. Claire sees the emotional side of me quite a bit. There is a incident that happened not too long ago where I had hit an extreme point of rage and intensity from something that happened back home that my friend Matt had to be a witness to. And I have no shame in talking about any of this, simply because I go through those times too, and my times are not even all that bad compared to what a lot of people go through, especially if we talk about outside of this country. So understanding that my situation isn't worse than the next one, nor better, but I have some really good people around me to help me get through these things. That's really what it comes down to. And on top of that, it's okay to be emotional and express emotions to the right people, but it's also okay to respect what you've gone through and not tell everybody about it.
Yep.
That's how I view it.
Dude, hell yeah. Everything you're saying, man, is it's all main topics of this podcast. Everything that I talk about with people, with guests, with the people that I work with on a daily basis is surround yourself around with the best people possible. Mm-hmm. I use the analogy of, if what's the goal of every NFL team is to win a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So if you're the star player on your team, you better surround yourself with the best team possible. Yeah. What happens when you let a cancer into the locker room? The locker room falls apart, team falls apart. And so that's how serious you need to be. And so discovering that purpose, that's how powerful it is in somebody's life. If this is your Super Bowl and it's the most important thing in your life, you're not going to make any allowances for anything outside of that. You know what I mean? Cut the bullshit, all the people, get out of the way. This is like what I'm doing. I remember not long ago I did a group at a treatment center, and I was talking to them about that and passion and purpose and trying to discover that. And so I was asking examples of, what are you passionate about? What motivates you? And their answers were, unfortunately, the two main things that motivated them were women and money, right? Which probably that's why they were there. You know what I mean? That would have been my answers probably too at some point. And so I started breaking that down with them, and I was like, all right, so if money's, if money's your motivator and everything like that, then everybody in this room, we should all have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, right? But what did you spend your money on? Drugs. Right. So obviously money wasn't the motivator. Yeah. Drugs were the motivator. And so you were passionate about getting high. So you were motivated to go get the money so you could discover that passion. Just it was a negative way. And so you need to take that and reharness and channel it somewhere else. Because when you discover that passion, like I said before, there's nothing that's going to get in your way. There's nothing that's going to stop you. And you can tell. If anybody's watching this and they can't tell from your face of how driven you are to do this shit, then I don't know. They need to open their eyes, because it's to me, man, it gives me goosebumps when I see somebody like that has that same type of intensity or motivation or passion towards that goal. It's a beautiful thing, brother.
Thank you so much. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
I know you're early off in your wrestling career.
Mm-hmm.
Thus far, obviously your character, I'm sure, will continue to grow and evolve into what it's eventually supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, where your wrestling character is, what has gone into that, and like what do people need to know about that character when they see him in the ring?
So really, the people that I've looked up to or I've really drawn to in wrestling were the people that look like they should be wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
So the body guys, Goldberg, John Cena is my second favorite. I've always liked watching Brock Lesnar. His daughter is actually a friend of mine, believe it or not. Yeah, she's great.
Congrats to her too.
Yeah, for winning national.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
Congrats.
Yeah, and I never loved Brock Lesnar, mostly because he's been rival with Goldberg for a lot of the time.
Right.
But I have a lot of respect for him, what he's done for the business, how talented he is, and he's just amazing. Like whether you like him or not, like he is a draw, and he's super entertaining to watch because he makes wrestling real.
Yeah.
And so, and I say that too. I do like him. It's just like Goldberg and John Cena were like my two favorites that I would like fanboy over. So, anyways,
I don't like anybody that fights Nate Diaz. Doesn't mean I don't like him or whatever on the podcast, but Nate Diaz is my dude. So if I fight him, I can't mess with him.
That's funny. I like that. So with that said, those three people individually all did an amazing job of taking who they are already and just amplifying it into a pro wrestling character that still remains themselves. And that's always appealed to me a lot, because from the viewership standpoint, there's that sense of realism that I really like, but also it allows me to go from my day-to-day introvert to a position to where I can be what seems to be extremely extroverted, if not just extremely intense, but as I talked about, amplifying that. So that's where you think about character work, and you think about, like, as soon as I walk out from the curtains and everybody can see me, how do I start to depict who I am as a wrestler, aka who I am in real life, and how do I play with that switch to start amplifying it, bringing it up, and then bring it down, bring it up again, and just start playing with that. And this is all stuff that I've learned from the people that have helped me throughout my wrestling. Don Vitale in Arizona, Dustin Rhodes here, Coach Eric at RWA. A lot of Kofi Kingston has given me a lot of great advice. Goldberg, obviously, and obviously being around people like Mark Henry and everything, you start to pick up a lot of things that they say, so you start to relay it back to Mark Henry's also another one that did a great job of relaying his real life self to his wrestling character, obviously. But
funny you should bring up Mark Henry. I was sitting. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the character work for myself will continually evolve to me finding better and better ways to show the intense, passionate side of myself, yet soft-spoken, humble side of myself on a big stage, but also be able to show my ability to articulate from the promo side, So that's where all these different skill sets, and like constantly thinking, how do I put this in and how do I make this my own, so on and so forth. All things that I'll learn as I go on, but I'm very early in my journey. But these are all things that I have on my general goal board of what I should be looking to try to carve out for myself.
Right. Dude, my wife and I were flying, I forget where we were going, but we were in the airport. It was a Friday morning. We were catching like a 6 a.m. flight, and I'm just sitting there. It's early. I'm drinking a coffee, and I see this huge dude get wheeled in a wheelchair, and I look over, and I'm like, oh. I'm like, that's Mark Henry.
Yeah.
And I was like, who? I'm like, it's Mark Henry. That's the world's strongest man. WWE. Like,
right.
And nobody else, it was early. Nobody else really knew who he was. And I'm like, bro, it was that little kid in me, that pool. Like, I wanted to go up to him so bad, but I'm like, all right. It's Friday morning at 6 o'clock. I got to chill. Just let him do him.
Right.
I don't want to bug him.
Yeah, I respect that.
And so I didn't do it. And so he ended up getting on the plane. And then we were the next ones to get on the plane. We got on early. And so we got on, and I'm walking on the plane, and he's sitting down, and he sees me looking, and like, he knew I knew who he was, and he's like, what's up, man? And like, cool as hell.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I wanted to come up and say hello to you. He's like, come on, you want to get a picture? And just so cool. And I had just started the podcast, so like, I wasn't even comfortable pitching it yet or anything, but I was like, Mark, I'd love to have you on the show and all that. And dude, and so super cool. He's like, man, absolutely, I'll do it. And then he was talking about, obviously, Dustin is in recovery, Dustin Rhodes. And he talks about that quite a bit. He's like, I'm going to get a hold of Dustin, you know, we'll do it. And I'm like, oh my God, let's go. And so I was like, do I get a hold of your people or what? And he's like, no, man, take my number down and all that.
Oh, nice.
And so I go back and I'm like, holy shit, Mark Henry gave me his number.
That's dope.
And so I go back and I'm sitting down and I'm trying to play cool. And I text him after like maybe 10 minutes. I was like, hey, Sean Livingston, and he's like, what's up, brother? Good to hear from you, this or that. And just then we're about to take off. And so that kind of sunk in or whatever. And I was like, man, he seemed really excited to hear from me. And I just talked to him 2 seconds ago. So the plane lands, he gets off, we get off, we say goodbye. And then I ended up texting him, following up. And he got really excited again when I texted him. And it dawned on me, I was like, holy shit. He thinks I'm Sean Livingston from the Golden State Warriors, the basketball player.
Really?
Yeah. And so I asked him, there's the same guy, same name, just spells it different. And I was like, hey man, you think this is Sean Livingston from the Warriors? And he's like, oh yeah, we had just done like something like that. But dude, that was funny. Like I'm sitting there texting back and forth with Mark Henry, and he thinks I'm the basketball player the whole time. So Mark, if you're listening, I would still love to have you on the show.
That's a pretty funny story.
Yeah. But it was good. But brother, I can't thank you enough for coming on. You know what I mean? Sharing your story, dude. It's a long time coming. I've been very excited when you said you come on. If you would, man, if you take a look into your camera, the way we like to finish up the show is people have heard your story. They got to know a little bit about you. If you'd be willing to throw off some I am statements to let them know who Jimmy House really is.
Yep. I am intensity, loyal, and humble.